You're welcome to Business Daily on Trust TV. My name is Chamun Dabeng. Let's talk numbers. We're starting off with the market this morning. You're welcome back, and once again, my name is Chamun Dabeng. Now, before the end of 2022, Nigerians were hit hard with the news that subsidy on fuel was going to be removed by June 2022. Now, the news was immediately trailed by reactions from Nigerians. Labor groups like Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress spoke up against it, arguing that it would make life very difficult for the citizens of this country. The pressure groups took it a step further by threatening to protest. Well, in a recent turn of events, the federal government made the decision to retain fuel subsidy indefinitely and will work on amending the 2022 budget to provide funds for that purpose. According to the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, the government came to the realization that the timing of its planned removal of petrol subsidy is problematic and will worsen the suffering of Nigerians. Now that subsidy removal has been suspended, what next? Joining me in the studio today is political analyst Joseph Ago and politician and political analyst Kwataye Ewusete Natu. Now, before we get to hear from our analysts in the studio, let's take a look at the reactions from Nigerians to the news that subsidy removal had been suspended.
The removal of subsidy, it's a good one, but in an organized system. But if it's an unorganized system, I don't think it's welcomeable, because it's going to backfire down to the grassroots, because the prices of things are going to rise, and there's going to be high rate of inflation. And but for a wise, I think this is the first time I've seen the government think twice, because I don't know, because tomorrow they can even decide to change that. They didn't say anything. That's how it has been happening in the system. But on the truth is that if they can think of suspending it, I think it's a good one, because I don't think Nigeria itself, they are not ready for removal of the subsidy. Because removal of subsidy, you have to really plan for the welfare of the people which you are ruling. Also plan for the welfare of the system, to make it to work much better.
It's a good one for now, because if you want to remove subsidy, that means you should increase income. All this stuff like minimum wage, they were calling over 29 or 30,000 thereabout. It should rise too, okay? Because as soon as the subsidy is removed and the fuel is increased, everything in the market down to whatever, the price will rise too. So we all attend the same market. So where would you raise the extra funds for? To make up for your purchases and upkeep. So the solution is a good one.
Yes, it's a good attempt, and based on these current situations where Nigerians are facing a lot of problems, high inflations, you understand, if you can see now everything's like it's even doubling itself in terms of price, and definitely fuel subsidy, when the government remove the fuel subsidy, everything will double itself. There must be an inflation. So it's a good, nice attempt to suspend it for this time at this current situation.
The suspension of the fuel subsidy issue is something that the government is supposed to look at the issues, what people are suffering in this country. That's the reality. So the suspend of the issue of the first, because I heard the Senate President was mentioned that yesterday. I think it's a good idea. Instead of now they are going to put this issue back. You see, the best thing is that for people to have fear of God, anything that is going to put people into trouble or into circumstances, they should be able to look at it carefully or look at it very well so that they can now be able to say, yes, this is the best thing for Nigerians. Let's find a way of moving the masses forward. You know, that, I think to me that's the best way they can do it. It's not that something, but okay, if they now put this subsidy, what is the achievement of it? What is the achievement from the government? What is the achievement from the masses? I think to me, I think they let them look at it carefully so that they can be able now to bring in a good idea or solution so that people can now be able to be happy with the government.
Well, as you can see from the reactions of Nigerians, the fuel subsidy removal suspension is seen as a good thing. Now, let me turn to my guests in the studio. Is this a victory for Nigerians out there? And now that the suspension, the removal of subsidy has been suspended indefinitely, what next? Let me start off with you, Joseph.
I think it's good and bad. But I think in the immediate, it's a good thing. But and long term, it's a bad thing because we're just delaying that doomsday. Mm-hmm. First of all, it doesn't make economic sense it doesn't make common sense for Nigeria to subsidize petrol. I mean, you can't subsidize a product that you have comparative advantage in. It doesn't make economic sense to subsidize because what we're doing is that we're subsidizing for West Africa because we have very open borders. We have trans-border racketeering with PMS. And if you look at all the other countries around, that surround Nigeria, Nigeria's petrol is cheapest. So people are smuggling petrol out of Nigeria into places like Cameroon, Niger Republic, Benin Republic, and so on and so forth. It doesn't also make developmental sense to still keep subsidy because these monies can go into critical sectors like education, healthcare, infrastructure, roads, and so on and so forth. But in immediate, it's a good thing because this government, for example, has lost a lot of credibility. This government campaigned, or this administration campaigned on the fact that on the basis, one of their campaign points was that subsidy was a scam. So we expected that once this government assumes office, they would go after the scammers. But that was not done. At the outset of this administration, a lot of people judged the administration by its intentions. So it promised a lot of things, including looking at the oil sector. At some point, after 6 months after the government was fully formed, the government was judged by its actions. And we saw the president taking the responsibility of oil minister. But that didn't solve any problem. I mean, we still had ballooning fuel subsidies. We still had cases of people taking money for fuel subsidies but not even supplying a drop of petrol. And now, this government is being judged by its inactions. And a lot of people are not giving the government the benefit of doubt at this point because it has squandered a lot of trust that it enjoyed in the beginning days of the administration. So people want a deregulated oil sector. People want monies to go into various sectors or other sectors of the economy. But at this point, majority of Nigerians don't trust this government to remove subsidy and also at the same time make life better.
All right. Go ahead.
I think, thank you for having me once again, Ms. Chairman. I think the question was always the right time, not that, paying of subsidy was good or bad. It was always a question of, is this the right time, to remove fuel subsidy when Nigerians are suffering? I don't know, there's no other way to put it. When you go to the market and you see the prices of food, and then you come back and check the unemployment rate, and then you check, the out of the out-of-school children's rates, you know that parents are unable to pay school fees. And then you check the security situation, and then you just check a lot of things, and then you start wondering. When they came up in December, I believe, that they wanted to remove the fuel subsidy, most of us were okay. What next? These monies are going to go into critical sectors, like, you know, he suggested. The next thing was, we are going to use the money for fuel subsidy to give 20 or 30 million Nigerians 5,000 naira stipend. It was just haphazard. And myself and other Nigerians, we said, this is maybe just another little Ponzi scheme that, you know, they wanted to execute. And I was of the opinion that they should leave it alone, because they have shown with several interventions that they do not have the capacity to execute. The End SARS protest reviewed the palliatives that were being hoarded. That was a program that was handled by the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. And then the Minister of Finance, Hajia Zainab, she also said the distribution of the 5,000 naira transportation stipend to 20 or 30 million. They were not even sure, you know, the number of Nigerians they were going to be distributing these monies to. They were not sure for how long. They were saying from 6 to 1 year. And we could tell that it was not well thought out. We could tell that it was going to end up, you know, as another big scandal. And that's why most of us were saying, leave it alone, leave it alone, leave it alone. Because, not because we felt it was a good thing to pay subsidy, because we knew, you know, the things that should have been in place for them to, should I say, rightly exit subsidy. I don't know the English, but we just knew they could not execute because they were not sure of anything from the beginning. All right,
so there's always a question of the timing, like you rightly said, and you know, even Minister of Finance Zainab Ahmed said that the timing was problematic, considering the fact that we have a very fragile economy at the moment. There's a high rate of inflation. Our naira is basically suffering at this point. So of course, there's always that issue of timing. But at what point has, you know, there been the perfect time for subsidy to actually, you know, be removed, and when will that actually be? Because we are talking about subsidy being placed in different sectors, like for example health and education and our security. This is where the money could actually go. But how long are we going to keep waiting till we say, okay, fine, let's remove subsidy and apply it into other things?
I think the question is not the right time, because there's not going to be that perfect time. The question is, has the government created that right condition for the removal of a petrol subsidy? I mean, for example, Nigeria is a generator economy, because we just generate, last time I checked, 2,500 megawatts, powering the largest economy in Africa. Many parts of the economy is powered by PMS, from the vulcanizer to the person running a corporate establishment or corporate front. If the government had fixed the power sector and reduce the demand on PMS, that is one way of creating that right condition for the removal of petrol subsidy. If the government had fixed the 4 or 5 refineries, technically 5 refineries that we have, I mean 2 in Port Harcourt, the one in Kaduna State and the one in Warri, and of course the small refinery somewhere in the Niger Delta. If the government had fixed, I mean, with all the money going in turnaround maintenance, if the government had fixed the refineries, it would have created that right condition. If the government had shown, I mean, in past practice of being transparent and accountable in its disbursement of funds, whether in the name of social safety nets and so on and so forth, it would have created that right condition. There's no perfect time for removal of fuel subsidy, but a government has to, or administration has to come in to create that right environment where removal of petrol subsidy won't just be a nail in a lot of people's coffin. I mean, transport costs will balloon. I mean, prices of food will balloon. I mean, our dollar will tank, and so on and so forth. So it's a whole mess. But I feel the government is not being sincere to say this is problematic, you know, because, I mean, for the past 1 year, Nigeria's economy has not done so, I mean, has not been in the best shape. I think the government is just counting political cost here. You know, it's not politically expedient to remove fuel subsidy, because if they do that,
the elections
the party will cease to exist, because you already, you have not done so much, and you're trying to strangle us to death.
Okay, so for you, the removal of or the suspension of subsidy removal is more of a political move than, the government actually saying that, what, we want to do this considering inflation, considering naira stability, considering, insecurity and everything that has basically affected our economy today.
If you say economics, look at how much has gone into the war on terrorism. Look at how much has gone into security. Remember the unaccounted weapons, from the Nigerian police force. This is taxpayers' money. People are taking weapons and these weapons are not accounted for. Look at Anchor Borrowers Fund. The CBN governor came up one day to talk about the fact that a lot of people that got these grants are defaulting. They are not paying back. So, if economics was the primary consideration, the refineries would have been set up, the power sector would have been set up, transportation, trains, mass transportation, there would have been a lot of investment in these areas. So, for me, the current president administration is just counting political cost here. It's not a popular policy. It has never been popular. Since the days of General...
the issue of subsidy removal, or, to keep subsidy or not to keep subsidy, has been a discussion for many months, for many years, pardon me, not months, for many years. From regime to regime, it's always been something, because it was, back in 2012, it was a major discussion. As a matter of fact, there was an attempted implementation. It had to be taken off. The same thing with the President Buhari regime. It was the same thing that happened. And then, after COVID-19, they had to, put it back. Pardon me, we're still actually in COVID-19. There's still a pandemic that's very much present. But Iwesete, what do you think about this? Is this subsidy removal suspension, that's a long word, is it a political move?
I think they considered, according to the Minister of Finance, one of the considerations was that the Dangote refinery was going to come upstream. So to me, I think I thought before they were confused. I still think they're confused, because I cannot, be polite when you are saying something that, with my layman understanding, I'm not an economist, but I know this is not going to end well. And then you have a Minister of Finance, and she's sitting there saying things that do not make sense to a layman like me.
Okay, all right.
And I'm saying this does not make sense to me, and you cannot, or she cannot, explain this in the most simplest terms why it makes sense. So to ordinary Nigerians like myself, I'll be wondering, what's the motive? There was, allegations about, the Dangote refinery being the major influencer of the removal of the subsidies and several other things, but we cannot prove these things.
Of course.
But at the end of the day, we shouldn't have a government that flip-flops. It just means that the people, you can consider a policy and withdraw and say this is not right, but you cannot just consistently not come to the table with all your facts and figures when you are in charge of 200 million Nigerians. So it doesn't make sense. Some people should have been fired. Some people should have been demoted. Something should have been done. There should be consequences when people come out there and just deceive Nigerians. Because in other places in the world, you will have to come and explain why you started something that you could not finish. I'm sure that monies went into consultations. I'm sure that monies went into conference meetings. And you know what we do in Nigeria. I'm sure there were budgets for these things. And they arrived at this conclusion, and now they are withdrawing and saying it's not the perfect time.
But is it necessarily a bad thing for government to basically adopt a trial and error kind of stance? You have to try out a particular thing, see if it works or it doesn't, then make a decision to withdraw if it doesn't work for the people.
I do not support, trial and error when there are going to be human consequences involved, because the person that is going to the market with 2,000 naira that cannot afford a derica of rice, oil, groundnut oil, oil, whatever, is a human being, probably with children and wives or husbands at home. So the consequences of these children starving because the government is flip-flopping and doing experiments that some of us know it's not going to work. You know, there have to be consequences for that. There have to be consequences for the families that are going to be kidnapped, the children that are being kidnapped in the northern Nigeria or all over Nigeria. Let me not say the northern parts of Nigeria. There should be consequences because some people are making bad economic decisions that are pushing the country further and further into poverty, and some people are resorting into terrorism and self-help, which, you know, and now other people are now becoming victims of these things. All these things are intertwined. All these bad policies, economics, you know, out of school children, insecurity, they are all intertwined. So there are human consequences to these things. It is not just that you're doing trial and error. It did not work. Let's go back to, there are consequences. And until we count the consequences and we punish people for doing these things, I don't believe we are going to move forward.
All right, so speaking on, or should I say, a lack of understanding to certain situations, how would you say that past governments and even the present one have handled the issue of subsidy removal? Are we just going round and round in circles at this point?
You know, there's a trend here. We only discuss full subsidy removal when the economy is bad. I mean, when revenue is not coming as much. But when we have that boom, we just go back to what it is we're doing before. And we have seen that, we saw that in the past administration. We saw that in the days of Obasanjo. We saw that even in Babangida's regime with SAF and the whole idea of removing subsidy as part of that structural adjustment package or program. So there is the word here, the operative word here is that there is always that political cost. So we can't, we tend to reason politics more than reason economics and development. And we have seen that since fuel subsidy was introduced under General Olusegun Obasanjo in the 70s up until now. So we introduce it when the economy is bad, then we withdraw it when it is not politically expedient. So, like I said, there's not a right time to remove, there will never be any right time to remove full subsidy. The government must come in that will create that right condition to remove fuel subsidy. As a matter of fact, fuel subsidy, I mean, the Minister of Finance admitted that it doesn't benefit the average Nigerian. I mean, people that benefit from fuel subsidy are people that have multiple cars. The people that benefit from fuel subsidies
it's quite a small percentage of people.
The petrol racketeers, people that take petrol across the border and sell it to neighboring African countries. The people that benefit from fuel subsidy are people at the ports, people in customs, and people in government that get kickbacks.
How much does it benefit the poor masses or the average Nigerian out there? All right. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to continue. But yes, looking at the issue of fuel subsidy, I completely agree that there's never really a right time to implement such policies or such decisions, but there has to be the right condition. Just like our guest in the studio said, certain things need to be put in place before the government decides to fully take on this decision. And rather than doing it all at once and throwing out that blow to Nigerians, it needs to be phased out progressively. Is that the word? Step by step. Yes. So we have come to the end of our show for today, and I would like to thank my guests in the studio. Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, and thank you so much, Ms. Iwesete, for being a part of the show today. And to our viewers out there, thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to follow us on our social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Just look us up at Trust TV News. Well, once again, my name is Chamun Dabeng. Come back again for more Business Daily. Let's talk numbers.